say we are going to have peaceful demonstrations. They use a very threatening language every time they're going to have demonstrations. It's a remarkable difference between the reality then and the reality now. The Gen Z would say we are going to have a peaceful, and actually what we saw was very organized, peaceful procession across the towns. What was happening in 2017 was a totally different story, as it were. And you see, as I said, the government has got instruments and machinery to collect information. We had information at that particular time that the nature and the character of that organization was actually going to cause danger to businesses, to individuals, and so on. And by the way, don't forget one thing, Sam. In 2017, when this was happening, in places like in Mombasa, we were already, although we couldn't tell the public this, we were already dealing with terrorist sleeper cells that were alive in most cases. We had a big problem of approaching Al-Shabaab sleeper cells in the coastal part of our country. That statement was born out of the knowledge and the background information we had about the dangers we were exposed by those sleeper cells. And you know, we were not wrong. By 2018, we were attacked in Dusit. So the statement was made in the context of that it's real that these demonstrations could be taken advantage of and so on. Plus, again, the organizers were not guaranteeing anyone peace, and they were not coming forward to say, let us organize this thing together with government. So totally different story from the Gen Z.
So if the opposition members didn't feel heard when you were in TJCS, why would Gen Zs trust that they'll feel heard under President Matiangi?
They never even sought audience. By the way, at that particular time, the opposition never sought audience.
They're expressing themselves on the streets.
Yeah, they never sought audience to be heard about what needed to be. And that secondly, by the way, what they were protesting about is something that the executive branch of government will do nothing about. You see, if, for example, you go to an election, you contest an election, and you lose that election, and you are aggrieved about that election, you go to court. And the court rules against you, or rules for you, whatever the case may be. The court rules against you. There's nothing any executive branch of government can do for you. There's nothing a minister can do for you.
The right to picket is under the Constitution.
But the right to picket was not the one in contest. We were not contesting the right to picket.
You stopped them.
No, we were not contesting the right to picket. We were just saying, you are free to picket, but we have certain... And in fact, at that time, if I remember very correctly, we used diplomats. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but we used diplomats, several leaders of the diplomatic community, to communicate messages that we thought we couldn't communicate in public. You see, like now, security actions that are being taken on terrorist cells and the sleeper cells in the country is not stuff that you can communicate very openly, as it were, because it's intelligence sharing and stuff like that. I remember during that time, we even looked for ways of sharing certain information we thought was very crucial and important to even the security of the opposition leaders themselves at that point in time. So this is their worlds apart, what we are talking about. And by the way, we were, if they had sought audience and said this is what we would do, we would give them audience. As Minister for Interior, I met so many civil society organizations, Amnesty International, anybody who had issues raised with us, we met with them. And we leveled with them. When we had information, we shared. When we didn't have information, we said we didn't have information.
And at that time, in November 2017 particularly, people died. People were shot on the streets. In hindsight, do you have any regrets?
Where people died, let me tell you, where people died and where crimes were committed by police, and then it's time to address this issue. You know, some people forget one thing, and then I hope you'll be available for this explanation. The training of our police and the behavior of our police is not cast out, or we don't train police in Kenya to kill citizens. The theory of policing in Kenya is for the preservation of law and order. That does not mean, however, that individual police officers can go above and over the responsibilities that they have. In most cases, that would happen. It's just like in the teaching profession. We do not prepare teachers in our country so that they can have affairs with students and engage in illegal activity. But we are aware that that kind of temptation can happen. That is why, for example, there is a code of conduct for teachers. That's why in the case of the police, we have standing orders. When riots have happened or any security activity across the country, when it has happened, everyone knows and everyone fears. Even in the military, when the military are going to act, even internationally, by the way, there are rules of war, there are rules of management of conflict, because people are sued and taken to the international community for breaching even the conventions on war. Same thing with policing. Riots can happen, and they do happen, and they will happen, by the way. And when the police are trained to deal with riots and respond to the riots, they are given clear instructions and guidelines on how they're supposed to go. Those who act outside of those instructions, now that they act outside of the standing orders, they face the consequences of the law. There are police officers who are in court today for actions they did. There are police officers who have been prosecuted. The question I think you ought to ask is that when we had violations, what do we do? And someone asked me that at a press conference the other day. I pointed out scale and admission. When things went wrong, and we believe in some cases things went wrong, we readily admitted. We actually cooperated with the agencies. I remember in the case of Pepipendo in Kisumu, for example, the relationship between IPOA, for obvious reasons, and the National Police Service is usually not the best, because IPOA is supposed to investigate the police and so on. We mediated as government. We said we would like to support the investigation in this matter because this has gone beyond what is supposed to be done. So it is in the scale, it's in the admission. Are we standing up to accept when wrongs have been done, that they be redressed? The answer is yes. And wrongs can be done anywhere. I mean, whether you look at the teaching profession, medical profession, legal profession, and so on, every organization has got. Why do lawyers punish people? It's because they know that you can be tempted to take clients' money. And there are lawyers in this country who have actually taken clients' money, and they have been punished because of that. So we can't come up and say we are punishing the Attorney General of the Republic of Kenya and we think the Attorney General is wrong because during his tenure, so many lawyers took clients' money. That's not the case. Because did the Attorney General stand up to what they were supposed to do? In my view, the answer is yes. That is it. So I can't take responsibility. Did I stand up and say where officers have committed crime, they need to face the law as it is?
Yet, of course, the police were out to quell those protests because of a statement you had made. And you said the Inspector General of Police has been advised accordingly.
I don't understand what you are reading in that statement. Under the law, by the way.
I'm saying...
Under the law, let me say this. Under the law, and then let us not always go to things when they are convenient to us. The Minister for Interior actually has no powers over the Inspector General of Police. The law even prescribes that when you address the Inspector General of Police on any matter, you put it in writing. I've said before, and it's on record, for the entire time I was Minister of Interior, I wrote 2 letters to the Inspector General, one to Boynet and one to Mutiambai. And before I send the letters, I always send them to the Office of the Attorney General for the AG's office to confirm whether these letters pass muster or they don't pass muster, as it were. So when I say the Inspector General has been advised accordingly, it means it just means exactly that you see the Inspector General has been advised to obey the law. And in most cases, by the way, when it comes to responses to riots and those kind of things, first of all, it's a matter discussed by the National Security Council. There has never been an incident, and I don't remember an incident myself when I was Minister for Interior, when I communicated with the Inspector General of Police independent of decisions that were made by the National Security Council. And the Inspector General sits in the National Security Council, as it were. The Attorney General would not allow me to communicate illegally.
This advice is from who?
When we say the Inspector General has been advised accordingly, it means the Inspector General has been advised to keep law and order because that is responsibility by the National Security Council.
So the National Security Council could have advised the IG?
Yeah, but you see, advice does not mean the Inspector General has been told to go and kill people. I don't understand what you're
okay. So it's the same statement I read for you, that due to the imminent danger, I want to skip a few lines in saying that we will not allow demonstrations within the central business districts of Nairobi, Mombasa, and Kisumu. And you also added the Inspector General of Police has been advised accordingly. So therefore, the quelling of protests would emanate from that statement that you made.
You're just overreading the statement, or you're reading your own things into it. Because you see, at all times, the Inspector General of Police is a member of the National Security Council. Everything about that is discussed at the National Security Council. In fact, the Inspector General provides a plan on what he or she would like to do in cases where we have a riot or we have a problem or a crisis of any kind. In most cases, we go with the plan that has been provided by the Inspector General. But you see, I don't know how it happens these days, but during the time I was in government, we had something we call the MAT, Multi-Agents Team, where security institutions sat together. The National Intelligence Service, the DMI, the Director of Military Intelligence, and the police would sit together and share information. The advice comes from this sharing of information because, for example, if the Inspector General does not have enough information on these terrorist sleeper cells, which will be an intelligence matter, he takes advice from there. I mean, we all take advice. Okay. We will say the minister has been advised accordingly. It means the minister has been given the information he needs to act and to do the right thing, as it were. It doesn't mean that the minister has been told, now go and clamp down on these people or whatever the case may be. And I honestly think you are just, any reading of that statement beyond what I've explained is essentially intended to be negative, and I honestly think that's what.
Now to current issues. The current hold of the office that you held at the time, just last week, I'm sure you heard what he said in Kikuyu, that any protester approaching or any person approaching a police station, shoot them. Is this an order you would give, whether publicly or quietly?
First of all, I don't want to pass judgment on my successors in the ministry. In fact, the challenge you usually have when you have served in government, in particular positions and so on, is to keep the discipline and the respect for your successors and those who come after you.
Yeah.
I don't know how they operate, so I don't want to pass judgment on them. But every time we had a very seamless relationship between the security sector and the legal advisory services of government. Every time we acted or did anything, we always consulted with the Office of the Attorney General. There are cases without number that I remember in government when I would have liked to do certain things, but the Honorable Attorney General, first Professor Gideon Muigai, and later on retired Justice Kiara Kariuki, would say you can't do this because you have no powers to do this kind of thing. Yeah, and then we always consult with the Office of the Attorney General. And actually, even where we went out, because sometimes, when you're out there in the field as a cabinet minister, you can take some decisions on the spur of the moment. And when later on, sometimes you're out there in the field, you're not even the legal people and so on and so forth. When later on, it's discovered that or when you come back to the office and even your legal team in the office tells you, Minister, this cannot work the way you did and so on, logically, or the Attorney General himself actually calls you up when they see it and they tell you this is it, what you said at this particular place or what you did at this particular place is wrong, and you don't have powers to do that kind of thing under the law. If that happens, as it were, they revise the position, as it were, because people need to understand one thing: public officials are human beings; they're not God. You can make mistakes, as it were. So. If the answer you want from me is yes or no, I wouldn't make that kind of order. Or saying shoot, kill, or whatever the case may be. But you see, again, as I said, I can't pass judgment on a context on which I don't have full facts about, as it were.
All right. What are your thoughts about, because we've seen a trend, goons are being deployed. We don't know by who, but we have seen them, especially in protests.
On this particular matter, in terms of security, the challenge we have in our country overall, politically speaking, is that there's a very low level of accountability in our political practice in the country. And what I mean by a low level of accountability is this: in addition to deployment of goons or whatever it is, as it were, the speech that we see from leaders and various actors within the political environment is sometimes very frustrating, as it were. On the case of deployment of goons, the government has got sufficient machinery and capability to address this particular issue. Honestly speaking, if I've explained this for a moment, I take it that this has not changed very much. In Nairobi, for example, we have the Nairobi Security team, which is led by the regional commissioner in Nairobi. It brings the county police commander, the county DC officers and NIs and everybody and so on. I cannot imagine actually that this security infrastructure does not know that some is hiring or training goons to bring them to town to cause mayhem. I cannot imagine that that's the case. And if they have the information, then they should go forward and act. What I find very interesting in my view, and if I may be very frank with you, is making allegations are being made by public officials. They are the custodians of information because they're the ones who have the instruments of power and the capacity to find out who is doing what. You know, the way the National Intelligence Service works, I can't carry guns, drive with guns from Kisii to Nairobi in my car, or have people bringing guns to me, and the National Intelligence Service does not know that Matiangi is receiving guns or is engaged with some rebel guys in some corner and they're supplying guns. And then for them to wait until a particular time, then they say, oh, Matiangi could be having guns. I find that very strange. Where were they when that was happening? And then it's their responsibility to know that the way this fellow is behaving, he normally has night meetings with people and he's recruiting these guns and so on. I don't want to pretend. I know for sure that the National Intelligence Service listens to our phone calls and so on and so forth. This happens. They have ways of collecting intelligence. So how is it planned? So the process is very simple. The National Land Commission is the one that does due diligence, is the one that confirms everything. The Minister for Education has no land records to ascertain whether or not land belongs to the public or belongs to private individuals. This is the responsibility of the National Land Commission. When the National Land Commission has completed their work, they will ask the responsible ministries to confirm public interest before they proceed to go and make the payments, as it were. What the chairman of the National Land Commission asked the peers, not even me actually, the peers, is to present a document signed by me to confirm public interest in that school. That's a school that receives teachers from TSC. It's a school that receives capitation from government. So that is the public interest we confirmed in the school. The process of acquisition and everything else was a matter of the National Land Commission, as it were. And even then, by the way, we didn't have a budget in the ministry. It's not as if in the Ministry of Education we had a budget to buy or compulsorily acquire land. For that to happen, the National Land Commission has to communicate with the Treasury and the PS in the Ministry of Education for there to be an agreement for the Treasury to avail resources for that compulsory acquisition. So my role was less than peripheral in the matter, as it were. The PS Treasury at that time was Kamau Thuge, who is now the governor of Central Bank. My PS, Dr. Belio Kipsang, is a PS to this day. They worked on this matter together and so on. To this day, I wonder why every time, you know, those who, my detractors and everyone who wants to insult me comes up and calls me Ruaraka, you know, land thief, as it were. Secondly, a competent court, the three-judge bench, made a ruling on this matter about 6 years ago. In that ruling, they clearly explained our role and pointed out clearly the role of the National Land Commission and the fact that we essentially were innocent on the matter because we didn't have capacity and a role to confirm that. Thirdly, the National Land Commission has got capacity, if the payment was done in error under the law, to claim or to get that particular payment that was done that day. Right now, the National Land Commission is seeking to recover about 1.7 or so billion that was paid in respect of city cabanas. I have not heard anybody calling the Minister for Tourism at that particular time city cabanas thief, as it were. And clearly they had no role to play in the matter. Besides, the peripheral role or the quote-unquote perfunctory role of the minister in this particular matter is one I played in respect of other conversations in government. When I was being excoriated on this issue, because it has been on the media all the time, I decided to go back on some of the things we did. I was the acting minister for lands when the government compulsorily acquired the building next to the office of the deputy president from an oil company. Because at that time, the National Security Council had a report that a foreign agency was trying to eavesdrop our deputy president then. So a decision was made by the security agencies, the building should be acquired compulsorily so that the deputy president is not exposed to foreign intelligence organizations. I mean, the role I played in that is the exact same role I played in the case of this particular school. So how is it that this time round I acted illegally, the other time I was acting fairly? People don't go to facts about this matter, they just decide, and again, low level of accountability, they decide this is something we're going to use to malign someone's name and so on and so forth, and they continue about it.
Have you heard from the SEC? on this matter?
No.
DPP?
When the investigations were going on, at that particular time, there was a time when investigations were going on this particular matter. They collected information from everybody on everyone's actions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to state here that the information we have is that the DPP, who at that time was Nuruddin Haji, had referred that file of Doraka land back to EACC. We checked with the EACC on the status of that particular matter, and they said it was still pending, and the investigation to be returned to the DPP once that decision is made.
But I have not had anything from them.
Yeah, but now, how do you plan to finance your campaign?
I don't think that's for public discussion, but the truth of the matter is that when you go into a campaign, you engage with, you seek donors and support. People support you for your campaign. I'll seek support from well-wishers and those who believe in me, who believe in my leadership, and those who want to work with me to support our campaign. I have no money to bribe people and go pay voters and so on and so forth, but I'll ask for support from friends and well-wishers like anyone does.
Campaigns are expensive in this country.
You're telling me.
You don't know. Surely, Dr. Fred, you know that.
So what are you suggesting? That we don't campaign because it's expensive? Or we don't
I'm just asking about your plan.
We don't seek leadership because it's expensive?
Not exactly. I'm just asking how you're going to finance that, because it's usually expensive.
I will do it the logical, open, transparent, and lawful way that it will be done. I will seek support from well-wishers and donors.
Would you know how much you're worth?
No.
You don't know?
And even if I did, that is not for public consumption, because I'm not a public official and you're not a commission to which I'm supposed to declare my wealth.
For sure, but it will become a very important question as soon as you declare
if
your candidate.
If you have any reason to believe that there's something that I have done wrong, our agencies are open. You can go to DCI or any of our investigative agencies and put the information there. And I've never been, since I was born, I've never been above the law. I always, even when I was a minister, I was not above the law. I always subject myself to the law.
It's good to hear that answer, and I'm saying that it's going to be a very important question as we get closer to...
I will not hide, shark or bend from any particular question asked of me in respect of my public service and in respect of my life, and I'll be forthcoming and totally open to respond to any issues that are raised.
Let's talk about, because you were a cabinet secretary in the education ministry for a couple of years, and the transition is now getting to the level of senior secondary come January 2026. When you look at what we are doing, because you are the father of CBC in this country, are you satisfied with the progress?
Well, I must say I haven't taken time to analytically review what is going on right now in the sector, except the public debates that are going on examination fee, on challenges of transition to junior secondary and so on. The impression I have is that the conversation could be more coherent from the point of view of government. But because we are in the very first and new cycle of implementing a new curriculum, you will expect those challenges that you see. What perhaps would be important to do at this particular time is to build better coalitions within the stakeholders and the actors in the sector, so that parents and students and teachers understand and they're very clear about what they're supposed to do, what will happen next year and the year after, and so on. And that's what happens always when you are at the very first cycle of a new curriculum. We'll wait and see how the cycle runs through, but